Today on Meet the Farmer TV, we're in the kitchen with In the Kitchen magazine. Meet the Farmer TV is made possible by Planet Earth Diversified, Melly Productions, and Leslie P. Jenkins Photography and Graphic Design. Culpeper's Channel 21, helping to preserve the agricultural history of Virginia, and Flavor Magazine, serving the Piedmont's local food and wine culture. I'm Michael Clark, your host for Meet the Farmer TV. Today we will talk with Rowena Morrow, the founder and editor of In the Kitchen magazine. We'll go to her kitchen. Arugula to zucchini at the White House.
Save the family farm.
In the kitchen.
I want to be a model for local food production, I think.
And the bill passed, although we still want those pickles on there.
You'll probably live long enough to sell a $2 a pound tomato. He said, but you ain't never going to plow a piece of flat ground that ain't got any rocks in it.
For locally grown food.
It's about market access.
Plants don't have personalities. And I got one, so someday.
We have a great solution to some of these crises that we're now facing.
And you're watching. And you're watching.
And you're watching
Meet the Farmer TV. So tell me, how did you get the idea to start In the Kitchen magazine?
Well, I had 40 years of business experience, and I knew at some point I was going to stop that craziness. But I didn't make a lot of plans. I thought I'd either open a restaurant or have a catering business because my love has always been food. And when the time came, I didn't have enough steam left to do that. And so I thought, well, I still want to share my food heritage because I wanted to have, a small restaurant where I could cook Southern country food that I'd grown up on. And I still wanted to share that heritage. And so I kept thinking, and it took me about 6 weeks to come up with a format for In the Kitchen. But the taproot for it has always been the meal planner, which is a calendar of every month that I use a menu for each day and one recipe in the menu. And I began that when I was a single mother. When I had to work and take care of a child and do all those things. And the planning was good. I'm a good planner. And so I used to map out what I did daily and shop accordingly. And then I always knew what I was going to have for dinner that night. It also allowed me to do what I really like, and I'm hoping that I'm teaching this to readers, and that is to prepare, we call it progressive cooking, where you cook. Every time you cook something for the next meal or for future meals. You make twice as much rice as you need, or you bake more potatoes than you need, or you cook a roast and you plan when you cook it to have meals left during the week. And when you get lucky enough to bake ham, then you've got 2 weeks or more of food because the bone makes the best soup in the world and those kinds of things. So the In the Kitchen monthly meal planner teaches progressive cooking just because it's there. People didn't pick it up at first, didn't pick up the idea. So this year I realized that the subtleties that are in the magazine, that I was the only one that was getting them. So this year I've had articles about the subtleties of In the Kitchen, how it progresses, and the fact that how my abbreviations go in the monthly meal planner and that kind of thing. And as a result, I've gotten more questions and more people commenting about the meal planner after all these 10 years.
Wow. Now tell me, you started out in June 2000, so the internet was sort of there, but not like it is today. How's the internet changed? I mean, it's affecting print publishing everywhere. How's it affecting you?
I think it probably has, up until this year, affected it very little, because I've always had a website as hobbled together as it was, but nobody ever used it. I never got any comments or anything. But now that your program is on the air, and so many people are referencing the little taglines that they get for internet addresses and things like that, then I'm finding that I'm losing out by not having those. And so on October 20 of this year, we're going to launch our website.
Oh, big new website.
Yeah, big new website.
In the Kitchen Online?
InTheKitchenOnline.com.
So it's the same website address that's current, it's just going to change format on the 20th of October.
Right. And it's going to be very interesting and very interconnected. I don't have all the lingo for what goes on in the electronic world, but there'll be lots of things to see, and it'll be connected through the magazine, so it's going to be interrelated. We call it the companion.
And so this program will be linked to that website, and people can watch the program right there.
Oh, won't that be exciting?
Yeah. 10 years of print and now a big new website. We're going to get multimedia. And you're now a video star.
And now I'm kicking and screaming.
Right.
Just another thing to have to do.
The next thing we know, we'll see Rowena texting as she's at.
I swear I will not Twitter or tweet.
Well, tell me, how did you start a magazine here in Charlottesville? Did you find anybody to help or somebody to bankroll the project? Or
yeah.
How did you get that to go?
Well, I had been in the local builder organization as their executive for many years. So I had a lot of good friends in the building industry and in related industries. And my good friend Ron Martin loved the idea. I made one call on him, and he decided that he'd wanted always to have a newsletter, but he didn't know how he was going to distribute it. And through the years, he really hadn't made a list of his customers or prospective customers. So this was a good opportunity for him to get his newsletter out, because from the start, we printed 10,000 copies. And he put his newsletter in until he died. And we wrote it together many months, and then with his son some months. And it was a wonderful thing, because essentially he bankrolled it for me. It wasn't expensive to do. I designed it to be an inexpensive medium because I wanted it to be a tool for local businesses. That's why I put it on newsprint. That's why I did the photographs myself, so that local advertisers could advertise inexpensively and get their word out. I've also been really lucky to have people who've always wanted to write for it, and they all contribute their talents to it. I don't pay writers, and I always have people waiting in line who want to write for In the Kitchen. Good writers.
So has it been a good experience? You're going to continue doing it for another 10 years?
If the creek don't rise. Yeah, I probably will.
So you're really living what you're writing.
Oh, yeah. Ron and I source 80% of our food in the winter and 90% in the summer from local producers. We go to the farms. We go to the farmers markets. We have friends who have gardens, and we source our food locally. I grew up on a farm in Green Springs, Central Virginia. We raised almost everything we ate. We bought coffee, baking soda, salt, just a few things at the fuel, feed, and seed store, and everything else we raised. And my grandmother taught me to cook, or that is, I learned by her side. She didn't instruct me, but I learned at her side to make bread, to prepare meals for the family every day, to prepare special things for holidays. And as a matter of fact, I have some of her cooking utensils here in the kitchen. And I still bake fruitcakes in her fruitcake pans.
So this is your real heritage that you're talking about.
Yeah, this is the heritage that I wanted to impart, and I have faithfully given recipes and developed many because my grandmother didn't have recipes. When she died, I couldn't find a cookbook. I have found since envelopes where she had put lists of ingredients on backs of envelopes. That's how I have her fruitcake recipe. I learned to make biscuits at her side, so I knew the feel of combining the ingredients. And, you know, we had plenty of butter and buttermilk and all of the ingredients, and we would take our corn to the mill and trade it for some flour. And so, yeah, this is my heritage.
So you really learned cooking in an intimate situation with your grandmother, and there really weren't a lot of measurements or things documented and written down, and now you're having to convert all that and write it down for people that want to know precise temperatures and measurements and exactly how it's going to work
and you
out.
know, she cooked on a wood stove.
What was the
me.
temperature of that?
She's a genius. She had a helper who cut all of her wood and kindling, and she would send Tommy out. She'd tell him what they were going to cook that day, and she'd send him out to get hardwood and softwood and kindling. I never learned any of that. As a matter of fact, the day she died, I knew we would have a house full of people. My mother and my father were off doing business for her before they brought her home. And I knew that the house was going to be full and that we didn't have any biscuits made. And so I went into the pantry and measured out what would have been one night of biscuits, and then multiplied that by the number that I knew we were going to. I needed 150 biscuits. That's what I figured. So I had to make 10 batches. But I forgot that I didn't know how to do the stove. But the man who helped my grandmother knew how to build a fire. And by the time my parents got back and my grandmother got home, we had 150 biscuits on the dining room table. So that sort of reinforced, it let me know that I could do it. And so when Christmas came, my mother liked the outside work on the farm. My grandmother was the cook. She said to my dad, I don't know how to make the fruitcake. But I did. And my dad did, because he had helped her before I was born. So together we put together a fruitcake recipe. And the other thing we always did on Thanksgiving, we had hunters come to the farm. And so we didn't have a Thanksgiving dinner. We provided cornbread and Brunswick stew for them. And my grandmother just had a list of the things that went in the Brunswick stew. Many of them were canned in our cellar. And it was a way of moving out one season and putting the new season up. And that's how I learned to make Brunswick stew, which is now in several good Virginia cookbooks.
Well, now, it sounds like your heritage and love for food comes from a really deep, heartfelt space. You know, it's multi-generational. You've got these intense emotional experiences with the food. This is very similar to why some of the local food producers, the alternative farmers, why they continue to farm when it's not the most profitable thing they can do. It's very difficult, and they may question whether they can ever retire from their efforts. So it's interesting that your love and connection with food kind of parallels that with the producers and the people that you're supporting when you write that magazine.
Well, after being away from it because we left the farm when I was 18. And then I went directly to college, which meant that, I was completely divorced from that type of life. And then I married, and then went into business and a number of things, so that it was 30, 40 years before though I sourced my food locally as much as I could during that time because it tastes better,
Yeah.
It was a long time before those old juices started coming to the surface, the reminder of my heritage. About the only time I had to exercise that was for holidays. And I'd, roast the turkey and make the dressing and, find a venison crown roast somewhere, even if I had to go out and shoot it myself, which I did do years ago.
You and Ron
and
are quail
I have,
hunters, too.
Yes, we do. We hunt. And we have, right now I have bird in the freezer, and almost all my venison's gone because hunting season's coming up. I have a couple of geese in there, a couple of squirrels. And so we do eat game along with our good beef from Griffin's area, and we like grass-fed beef and from various meat farmers
Local
around
meat
here.
So is this like the Beverly Hillbillies? You stop in the middle of the road and Ron holds up traffic and you come out with your shovel and get the...
You think that's funny? Truth be told, we have harvested 2 deer from the road, which we saw them killed. But when Ron wants to pick up a squirrel every now and again, I won't let him do that.
Well, I hit a deer with my large truck in Gordonsville, and it was right by the graveyard, and the deer went into the graveyard and died, and I called the sheriff and said, I just hit a deer, and they're like, well, we don't care. And I said, well, can I take it? And they go, yeah, fine, you don't need the game warden or anything. But it created a local stir because there was some guy, hauling a bloody carcass in the graveyard and putting it in the back of a big truck. So tell me about some of your favorite issues of the magazine. So what, we've got 120?
Just about. And then when you start multiplying the meal planner times 30, times 12, times 10, you think of the menus and the recipes we've got. It's one of these days I might get around to writing a book. You never know. The first one, I love tomatoes. I started with tomatoes, and as I looked through getting things ready for you to see, I noticed that I have 8 covers that have tomatoes.
You must like tomatoes.
On them. Well, every summer, in the kitchen is seasonal,
right.
And what comes along in August is tomatoes, and so there are a lot of tomatoes.
Now, you've
on the
grown
cover.
tomatoes right here on your patio.
I have, not very successfully. We don't get a good light angle. And here is the most recent tomatoes. And if you'll notice, we've changed our headline, gotten a little more modern here. And that happened last December. So we kept this for 9 years.
Wow.
I make haste slowly. And actually, the meal planner has changed. We now have, of course, the what I call my centerfold. It used to be all crammed onto one page. But you see, this is what the other meal planner used to look like. Talk about shorthand.
And that's why you had to explain all those abbreviations.
That's right. And
this your favorite rooster?
Most people know that I love chickens. And the reason is I started raising chickens on the farm that put me through school. So everybody knew that I like chickens, and that's why I have more chickens in this house than is probably legal.
Yeah.
But this is one of my favorite covers because I love that old rooster. And my friend who lives in Atlanta has just done this in oils for me, which I'm proudly display in my kitchen.
Now, where was that taken?
On a little farm south of Lynchburg. She was having a backyard sale, and Ron and I were putzing around, and I saw this old rooster who kept, you know, fluffing around, and he finally settled down, and I took his picture. You know, local is a relative thing, which I have not been able to tie down, by the way. When I asked Whole Foods what they thought was local, they said anywhere you could drive to and get back in one day. Well, that's 250, 300 miles. I like to say Virginia is my limit, but yet that doesn't let me get up into the Chesapeake Bay and get all the seafood I might like to get, and it's also a long way to Bristol.
Yes.
So anyway, 100 miles is pretty much our limit for, unless we specify that it's somewhere outside of 100 miles, then I would say for in the kitchen, 100 miles is local. And yet, when the couple in Canada did that 100-mile meal, that was highly promoted in a lot of magazines, Ron and I took the challenge and did our Thanksgiving that year in 50 miles. And the only thing that we gave up was oranges and cranberries. Everything else was sourced locally, and we didn't have to alter what was our traditional menu except for those two things.
Well, really, the concept of local could be kind of distilled to like the original hunter-gatherers. And you might go hunting for a week. You know, the hunting party might be gone for days and travel many miles and then bring the food back. But I mean, you wouldn't declassify them as local because they went on a hunting expedition.
Point.
So.
But I don't camp out.
Yeah.
So I've learned a lot doing in the kitchen.
Well, that's pretty good photography of prepared food then. I see another one of those chickens on there. Your rooster on the meal
Oh,
plan.
there's a chicken on every one of them.
Yeah.
And there's a chicken on the front cover
Yeah.
of every one of them.
There's chickens
And
everywhere.
there's a chicken at the end of each article.
So really, the In the Kitchen magazine is almost like your memoirs of 3 generations of food.
Yeah.
So that's
Nice summary, Michael.
So is there anything that we didn't touch on that you really want to say in the show or to the people watching about the story of In the Kitchen magazine and what it means to you?
I just wish that more people would realize that they need to cook in order to feed their family nutritious food. It's easier and cheaper to cook it than it is to buy it in the store. Now, I can make a cake in probably 10 minutes, and that includes getting the mixer out and washing it.
Mm-hmm.
Well, by the time you've gone to the grocery store and bought the cake and made sure you know, it takes the same time.
And then you have all that stress of driving and the traffic and a
not
huge
only-
carbon footprint.
Not only that, you have ingredients in it that you have not chosen yourself.
Not something that your grandmother would have as a list of from the root cellar or from the pantry.
No, but some things you can't even pronounce or spell. So that's why I think that preparing your food is so important to the health of our nation. But what's more, I believe that the old adage of people who eat together stay together. Ron and I eat together every evening. I pack his lunch every day. I can't tell you how much money that saves. But the companionship and the doing it together is wonderful.
So there's really not only this increased nutrition, but there's an increased emotional and spiritual health of cooking food in the kitchen.
My granddaughter can cook, and she's 11. My daughter is a good cook. She doesn't particularly like to cook, but she knows the importance of cooking. But now Leah, who's 11, can pretty much take on the responsibility of preparing a decent meal. She doesn't do it every night, but she can do it. And we started when she was like 3 or 4, you know, dipping muffins in juice. There's always something in the kitchen that children can do.
Well, that's
If
pretty
you
amazing.
Take the time to show them how to do it. Because they like to do things, and they like to be helpful.
So you don't need an Xbox or a Wii, you just need a kitchen.
Right. What's a Wii?
It's some funny electronic game that you play.
Oh.
Like you hold a mouse or you hold something and you be like it's a baseball bat or a golf club, and the TV mimics whatever you're doing.
You know, I don't have a lot of gadgets in my kitchen. And we don't need to go there. It's just that my kitchen is simple.
Well, you started with wood stove.
Yeah, and a wooden bowl and your hands and pitcher of milk that didn't have to be refrigerated because you got it from the cow that day.
Well, that's wonderful, Rowena. Is there something you'd like to ask of the readers and subscribers of In the Kitchen?
Well, I'd like to invite them to become more interactive within the kitchen. With the website, it will be easier than writing me a note. They can just email it, and it will be easier, I think, for me to be more interactive with the readers, and I wholeheartedly invite them to do that. And remember that the launch is on the 20th of October.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Rowena.
Oh, thank you, Michael. It's been a lot of fun.
Well, there you have it. Rowena Marles' In the Kitchen magazine, a whole multi-generational memoir of food and recipes and importance of local food, the spiritual and emotional nourishment of cooking in the kitchen. And thank you for joining us for another Meet the Farmer TV.
Wow. I put that on my tombstone.
Today we're at the White House Farmers Market. Let's see what fresh produce has come to D.C. From arugula to zucchini at the White House, fresh farm market.
My father used to ask me, he'd say, boy, he'd say, what do you want out of this life? And I'd think for a second, I'd say, well, Dad, I'll tell you what. I said, I'd like to be able to sell a tomato for over $2 a pound. And I would love to plow a piece of flat ground and have no rocks in it. And he thought for a second, he said, you'll probably live long enough to sell a $2 a pound tomato. He said, but you ain't never gonna plow a piece of flat ground and ain't got any rocks in it. And it's the truth.
Meet the Farmer TV is made possible by Planet Earth Diversified, Melly Productions, and Leslie P. Jenkins Photography and Graphic Design. Culpeper's Channel 21, helping to preserve the agricultural history of Virginia, and Flavor Magazine, serving the Piedmont's local food and wine culture.